Thank you for joining us this evening for the Artist Exchange, a group created by and for artists to share new work, ideas, resources, and opportunities monthly over a glass of wine or tea, as you prefer. So grab your beverage and join us as we discover the work of two photographers, Marna Clarke and Neo Serafimidis. I'm Shelley Rugg, the gallery coordinator at Gallery Route 1. For our presentation today, we ask that you please mute yourself and please stay muted unless we ask you to unmute. For best viewing, select speaker view from the top right corner of the Zoom viewing screen. We want you to know that we are recording today's presentation for future viewing on our website and YouTube channel. Now, please join me in welcoming our host, Pamela Blotner. Pamela Blotner is an artist, educator, and curator who lives and works in the Bay Area. In her Berkeley studio, she creates sculptures and drawings that explore humankind's relationship with nature, science, calamity, and healing. She has worked as a sculptor illustrator for the Houston Zoo and as an illustrator for Human Rights Watch, Physicians for Human Rights, the UC Berkeley Human Rights Center, Art for Conservation, and the Leatherback Trust. Welcome, Pamela.
Thank you, Shelley, and welcome all of our guests. And welcome our guests and our special guest who will be speaking tonight. And I get to introduce them. Esteemed artist Marna Clarke and Neo Serafimidis create powerful photographs that differ in both subject and tone, yet they share a subtle play with light, and throughout each artist's works, remembrance emerges as a recurrent theme. Okay, beginning with Marna. She was born in Louisiana and formally educated in North Carolina, New York, and Connecticut, all the while educating herself in photography. But it wasn't until her 1996 move to California that she began taking pictures full time. A reviewer here in the Point Reyes Light once wrote about her work that they show Clarke's understanding of the power of chiaroscuro, of what is revealed and obscured, known and unknowable, portraiture's age-old gravitas. That's light. Marna, take it away.
Okay. Well, I could go into talking about light, which you just introduced. I had a teacher once that said, until you fall in love with light, well, back up. When you fall in love with light, your photography will change. And it's true. And I can look back in my work and see when this transition happened. My career in photography is actually in two parts. I started in 1973. I was living in New York City, had two small boys, married, and I took an introductory course at the Midtown YMCA. And then I took a darkroom course. I had a point and shoot film camera. Of course, digital didn't exist then. And I did black and white film, had it printed until I took the darkroom course. And when I took the darkroom course, I bought a larger and all that. And I didn't have a darkroom. So my kitchen became my darkroom and my bathroom. And I would do that at night and then have to get up early with kids. So it was kind of a hard introduction. We eventually moved to Connecticut, and then I got a real darkroom. And I learned to print black and white. I never printed color. I didn't take color for a long time. And I did mainly kids, I was following my kids, and I was following what my life was, and it was kids. So I have a lot of pictures of kids, and I tried to get into this. There's a lot of websites back then where they took in pictures that they could use like stock for textbooks and stuff. And so I did that some with my black and white kid photos. And then I did events, weddings, kids' birthday parties, portraits. And I eventually reached a point where I hit a wall and I just said, I don't know what else to do. So I'm just going to stop. And I did. And I traveled, and I eventually moved to California from Connecticut via a lot of places. And I met a man who I eventually ended up living with, who said, you know, you got to get back photographing. These are too good. He had seen pictures on my wall of color photographs that I had taken of France and Martha's Vineyard, places I'd been. I didn't print them, but I did take them. They were film. So he gifted me a digital camera in 2005, and I began to use it taking walks. The first one here is a madrone. This is a real close-up. And I was astonished at the colors that these trees that slough off or peel their bark and the skin that's underneath. This particular image is a little subdued, but it's Zoom, I think, that's doing that. But anyway, this is a madrone peeled back, showing the skin underneath. Next slide, Shelley. This is also madrone. It's the skin, the green with the orange or the peach that's going to peel off and drop. Next one. This is called a plane tree. I think it's sycamore as well. This was taken in France, actually, where I started doing this work. And it's just abstract. It's very macro. I have the camera very close to it. Then I went to a portfolio review in the San Francisco Art Institute. They're still doing them. There's one coming up if anybody's interested. It's March 18th through 20th at the Photo Alliance, which meets at the San Francisco Art Institute. And in 2010, I went to my first portfolio review, which I couldn't recommend more to anybody. It's, you get to show your work to professional photographers that are teachers or gallery owners or, far up in the ladder of photography. Sometimes it's hard to take what they have to say. It was for me because I didn't get many accolades about my artwork, but I did get to meet a woman, Janet Delaney, who asked me to join a class that she was teaching in her home. I met Ann Jostraub at RACO. I met a lot of people that have stayed friends and have helped me through the years. So it was well worth the money spent on this portfolio review. Next slide. This was so I just started taking pictures. I live in West Marin, which is northwest of San Francisco. It's beautiful nature. It has these old ranches. This is actually looks like a double exposure, but it isn't. It's really early in the morning, and I'm looking through a window with my lens right against the glass, so that the windows you see and the ground underneath are in the room that I'm looking into. But the buildings and the sky and the trees and the clouds are a reflection from behind me because it's early morning and it's coming in direct. It's you can see the boards. It's quite interesting, but it's a unique kind of process. Next slide. This was taken going into someone's home or just going to visit. And he had these 4 towels out on the line. And it's a good example of just having your camera with you because something could come up and catch your interest. And this certainly did. And I have used it. You'll see later, I have a slide where I've used it in a diptych. Next slide. This is the Nicasio Reservoir, which is nearby where I live. And it's film. I still take film occasionally. And it's a stormy day. This reservoir is an infinite source of photographs. It's just fabulous. You have to get out there early in the morning and get the light. This is facing east. It's wonderful. Okay, next slide. I started experimenting with combining pictures that would play off each other. You looking at you just kind of throw them out there and start combining them. This was my partner Igor that I was walking into the woods with. I just took the picture because I liked it. This is a woman that I asked to take her photograph, and they went together. I had tried it reversed and it changed the whole meaning. But I had a lot of fun doing these diptychs. It's just great. Next slide. So here are the 4 towels again, combined with a photograph of a shadow of me with my hand up. It just seemed to go together. And I lined up the tabletop with the banister, so it would just flow into the other one. Okay, next slide. Then I started combining. I went back and looked at all the photographs I had from growing up. My dad he loved photography, and he took these pictures. He was actually quite good at it, though he never admitted it. But this was in the 50s. You can see the 50s and the fabric and the drapes and the hi-fi equipment. Anyway, I was so tired of his taking pictures of me that I put my hands over my face. And then when I saw this picture next to it, which was taken at a friend's house, I went to spend the night with her. And when I woke up, there were these handprints on this window. And I went, oh my God. And I had my camera, so I took the picture. And later I combined them. Next slide. This one is also me as a teenager ironing. And later, I can't give you the reason I combined them. It just seemed to go. I was in New Orleans visiting, staying in the French Quarter, and this bathroom had a yellow window. I had to do something with it. So I just put myself in the tub and went at it. Next slide. Okay, so 2020 happens. We're all in lockdown. And since I live in a rather rural area, we were not so bound by the 4 walls, but we could get out. And I went around and asked neighbors and friends if I could photograph them with their masks on somewhere outside. This is a friend who has a garage that you can walk onto the roof of. So naturally, that was where I put her. Next slide. And this was a family with a trampoline in the yard. The family, the 4 members that are on the trampoline are anti-vaxxers and anti-masks. So I put them on the trampoline. They're doing athletic adventure, and this was okay. But the grandparents put their masks on, and the grandmother became sort of disinterested and was more interested in her iPad, but it's okay. It makes a good picture. Next slide. Then I started photographing contemporaries, older people. This is a woman, an artist, Marina Beebe, and this is film as well. I think sometimes I can really tell when it's film. it has a different quality. And the next slide, Shelley. This is another friend who stood under this light, and I went, oh yeah, just stay there. I want to do this because it just is so weird. And his glasses matched his shirt. And so I had a show of these people. I called it Autumn because they were going into not quite old age, but not young either. Unfortunately, if I really thought about it, I wouldn't have included some of the people because they were already dead. But I had taken all these pictures of my friends and family and stuff through the years, so I just put all these people in a show. Next slide. In 2010, when I joined Janet Delaney's class, I also turned 70, 2010. And I felt I really wanted to see what I looked like as an older woman. I wanted to see what age had done. So I started taking pictures of myself unclothed, and some of Igor, my partner, and some of us together. That was the first phase of it. It was like the physicality of being older. This is one, obviously, we're embracing. Next one. This is the back of his head when he turned 90 in 2019. And there was a skylight over him. I walked out. We were not at home. This was a place we went to stay. And I just went, oh, yes. And I got the camera, and there it was. Next one. He's getting quite blind. He's now 92. And he has cataract operations coming up. But until then, he has his glasses he wears and a pair of glasses that he uses as a magnifying glass. I call this 2 glasses to see. Next slide. Then I started catching us doing things around the house. This one, we had to change the light bulb in that soffit up there. And I needed help. And this one came out of it. So it kind of adds a little humor to the project. Next slide. This is called Embrace, and it's back when I was doing more physicality, starting to move into relationship as well. Next slide, Shelley. And this was last year. He broke his arm. As you can see, the sleeve is, the right sleeve is empty. His right arm is in a cast. And I'm just caressing it and trying to encourage him. It was not a nice time for him. It was awful. He was painting. He's a painter and an architect. And he backed up, tripped over a portable heater that he had forgotten was there in his studio, and flying through the air and landed on his right elbow on a hardwood chair and broke his elbow, basically. So this was a comfort. I call it intimate moment. Next slide. These are my legs. It was part of taking the physical body and showing the changes. The string hanging down from my pajama bottoms on the left leg, and the veins that stick out, the imprint of the socks. It's not a lovely picture, but it's lovely in the light, or the light helps it. I mean, this is all about light. Photography means writing with light. So if you don't get that, you're missing the boat. And so that's the story of that photo. Next. This was when he got his cast at Kaiser, and he was in shock. It was hard for him at 92, or he was 91 then, to undergo all this and know that he had all this weeks ahead of him in a cast. Next slide. this was when he takes a rest every day with his feet up. The painting on the wall is one of his. I call this under the painting. The figure in the left of the painting is him. The others are friends, family. He took this, he got the negative of the colored print. This was from a wedding, and he painted it from this color negative. And at the opening, when this painting was shown, some kid came up with his iPhone on some app that changes negative to positive and turned it into a positive and showed it to him. He was like in shock, and he's like, wow. I continue to take these photos. It's not over. We're still alive. I want to finish. I want to keep going, and I'll finish some point. It's my way of dealing with aging and the imminent event of death. I find it helps me to face it. It helps me to deal with it. I think it's probably, I read a lot. I study a lot about aging. I've had chances to be on panels about aging, and it's my way, these photographs is my way into dealing with it, hopefully with my eyes open. That's it.
Thank you, Marna. Thank you for sharing all of that, as well as your beautiful work.
You're welcome.
Okay, feel like we all ought to take a deep breath before we turn to Neo, but we do, time is precious. So I want to start out and call him a Californian. And Neo Serafimidis started out studying theory and philosophy. And for many years, his creative work was electronic and experimental music and performance art. He had a group called Synesthesia Works that created multimedia pieces that often included photographic projections in the theater and installation works. He didn't return to photography in earnest until the mid-2000s. He photographs the world around him now, his neighborhood, and a dynamic group of photographs he calls portraits, but he also photographs ordinary objects that he finds and collects, and he calls them his artifacts. With that, welcome, Neo.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the invitation, and just happy to be here and honored to be here with Marna and her wonderful, wonderful work. So I am a photographer here in the Bay Area. I live and work in the East Bay. I have a regular day job, so a lot of the photographing that I do happens in the course of going about my regular day, excuse me, living and working and commuting. And there is a little caveat there, because a lot of the way that I was used to working was before COVID. And after that started to happen, then there was a lot less getting out, but I did some workarounds as I'll explain. I'm not that clear on categories, but I guess a lot of what I do photographically is documentary or street photography. And some of it is personal and a lot of it isn't. But kind of I feel like there is a relation between how I think about my work and what Marna has described, because I see it as an exploration of memory and the idea of nostalgia in its kind of original sense, of a kind of a longing for home and sense of loss that is so deep that it is a kind of illness. And I don't know that I'm experiencing that exactly, but I do feel, the loss of family members, and in particular, after my mom passed away, who was the very last of her generation of all my aunts and uncles. And so that sort of leaves you in a position where like, oh, now I've really kind of assumed the mantle. So I tried to explore the relationship between memory and these objects, personal effects, possessions, and even automobiles and houses and furniture and ephemera that are triggers for memory and that can sort of build up associations. And the relationship we have with those objects is one of the ways in which we tell our story and tell ourselves our story and tell our story to other people, and continue our personal identity through time by kind of retelling the story of who we are, where we came from, and the objects that surround us. Okay, so one of the first kind of documentary projects that I embarked on with this photographing of objects was when my mom had come to a point where it was clear she had to go into a memory care facility. And so we had moved her, and then I had to empty her home. And partly for myself, in order to sort of deal with the loss of all this material that was part of my story, growing up and so on, I decided to photograph absolutely everything in her home. And I took some wide shots of entire rooms, shots like this of, areas in the room with some details of objects, and then some shots like this of individual objects. And by the end of it, I had well over 1,000 photographs. And it really took me a long time to figure out what to do with them and how to present them. And what I eventually hit on was pulling them together into large grid works. And these are large panels about 24 by 36. And I showed about 15 of them in my first solo show at Mercury 20 Gallery in Oakland. And so a lot of these objects I myself hadn't seen in quite some time, and just seeing them and arranging them and touching them really brought back a lot. And I really started to kind of develop this idea of these things being power objects and having a kind of certain psychological power. So these are all, these darker ones, this dark background is an old pedal-driven sewing machine that my mom sewed on for decades as a seamstress. And I just quickly ran through, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I had my very first digital camera, or digital SLR, I should say. And I just quickly, set an object down, took a picture, put it in a box, and out to the curb it went when the box got filled up, or, back to my garage. So this was some kitchen objects. Here's some personal effects, a photograph of myself as a teenager, some family, her sewing supplies. Some of these things we did keep, trivets, which we still use, but things such as her watch down at the bottom there that she wore for decades, my dad's old electric racers, 2 of them, non-functional. Why did she still have them? I don't know, but she did. And as soon as I saw it, I just was 8 years old again. And then her clothing, she did so many of her own clothes, but also had store-bought stuff. But many of these things are items that she had made herself. And so, as you can imagine, when you have these attachments to things, it can be hard to get rid of them. But again, photographing them and having that document is what helped me to work through that process. Another series, another phase of what I was doing around those years, that kind of late, I'd say 2009, 2010, was commuting back and forth to work, often on my bicycle. And I had the opportunity to just drive through these neighborhoods and see things that you don't normally see if you're just driving on the main streets, like, you know, an old car and the topiary style of a house like this, which, you know, sort of brought me back to someplace in Fresno in, you know, the mid 60s. And so I started focusing on that. And in some of these images like this one, I sort of played with the color and played with the idea of a color shifted old snapshot or something. Here's another one. This is actually the Valiant parked in front of a friend's house. And I happened to be going over there and saw this and just saw the step on the stepping stairway on the one side, the color palette with the yellow of the car and the green of the building and even the blue sky kind of all working together. So took this picture. And then this is a shot, just kind of a commute shot, you know, bicycling down some street, and wow, there's these old cars, and trying to do something a little dynamic with it. It's almost as if the photograph isn't necessarily about the car, but the cars are there. Here's another one, and another kind of theme that I find interesting, which is decay. Nothing new. I think a lot of photographers and other artists have explored this. But I was walking through West Berkeley after dropping my car off at a repair shop and heading to work, and came across this yard with this Buick Riviera, I think, that's being overtaken by bushes and returning to nature, and this Chevrolet with the flames painted on the hood. And so it was a fascinating scene. Then a couple of years ago, well, several years ago now, I guess, I started working at night more often, but the cars and the old objects that, you know, take on a kind of symbolic meaning or iconic meaning for different people persisted through. And I loved the sense of mystery that sort of was cast over scenes and objects that are perfectly familiar in the neighborhood during the day, and you wouldn't necessarily think twice about them, but then at night, they just seem a little bit mysterious and different. So I have quite an ongoing series of what I call neighborhood nights. Here's another one. And a lot of these are fairly long exposures, 30 seconds to a minute, depending on how much ambient light there is. And such interesting things kind of come out of that, happen. Colors that you don't really notice or see that well in person when you're there kind of accumulate and become more saturated. And then there's other interesting things, like in this one, one thing I really like is this sort of strange repeated shadow of the power lines that make those horizontal lines on the building. And with these LED lights, there's a weird pattern that happens sometimes. A single object has a repeated shadow. This is another one that's in the neighborhood. Again, I was drawn to it because of the car. I ended up really enjoying the light coming through the screen door, and the screen door itself reminds me of something, the kind of style of screen that we had as a kid in Fresno when I was growing up, and the slight dilapidation to the house, and kind of has all the elements that draw me in for a photograph. There's also, I think, kind of a cinematic quality to this one, the way the light is just hitting the front corner of the car. And I'm not really quite sure what that light is. It might have been a car coming down the street. Suggests some kind of action that is maybe going to take place. This is another one out late, and it's interesting to see things like not just the old car, but what's going on here with this tarp in the back, and what are these flowers? Oh, those are flowers just behind it, but you get a little bit of an optical illusion. Is that something in the back? Or is it growing out of the side of the car? What's happening there? But also the richness of the color. There's a lot of the street lights do cast kind of a yellow glow. Not sure if that's all of what was going on here, but again, the color palette was pretty intriguing to me. Love the light. This is another one where might be that surprising during the day, but interesting at night. This car kind of leering out of the dark and like winking at you. One of the covers for the headlights stuck open. So there's a little bit of a, I don't know, kind of a humorous quality to that. Covered cars are another kind of favorite. And this is a pretty long exposure and an example of where doing that just makes the sky do interesting things. You get all this reflected city light off the fog or the clouds, and you get magentas and greens. And then I also have a little series that I started when we were in lockdown, when we were sheltering in place. So the first few weeks of that was really disconcerting. My work shut down, but we were all supposed to work remote. I work in IT, so I was suddenly spending long hours trying to get all my coworkers connected and able to work remotely. But naturally spending a long time in the office, in my office here in front of my computer. And finally, after about 3 weeks or so, decided I've got to get out and started taking walks at night in the neighborhood and walking by the homes of friends and started texting with them. And then eventually that turned into, hey, can I take your picture? And I didn't really guide them or instruct them in any particular way to be, but I think we were all sort of feeling this kind of, we wanted to be together, but we couldn't, and there was this impenetrable distance between us. And so it turned into a series of about 82 sort of portraits, pandemic portraits. Here's another one. This is a friend and her daughter. Actually, the daughter is my son's age. These were people who I actually don't know, but they were friends of friends. And so when they saw their friend's portrait, they were interested in having their own picture taken. And I started getting a lot of that. And so there were portraits of people who just came to me. This is actually a coworker, and they were in a South Berkeley apartment. There was no real shot from the front, so I came around into the backyard where there was a slightly menacing dog, but I managed to get set up with my tripod and get a shot or two off before running out of there. Another neighbor. And I believe this is the last one. This is a family that had reached out to me after seeing the work on Instagram, wanted to have a portrait made, and in particular, wanted to honor the memory of their son, who had been a photographer and had passed away. He was at Cal Arts. And, oh, this is in fact the last one. So this is another friend's family. another instance where there was no real front shot to the house, and it's kind of on a hillside. We struggled to find a way to get a good shot. I didn't think this was going to work exactly. I had my back up against the fence and was much closer than I really wanted to be. But after getting it on the computer and really looking at it, I thought it was a pretty decent shot. And this was actually one that was on display in the De Young for the De Young Open. And that is it.
Well, thank you, Neil. That was great, and a great contrast to Marna. And I hope that you all have questions, because normally at this point we ask the artists to converse only amongst each other, but because we are running out of time, we'd like to also invite the audience. If any of you have a question that you would like to ask either of our photographers. So let's open it up.
Question for both photographers. For Marna, there's shots of you and your husband. I presume you're putting your camera on a tripod and using a timer so that you have a pretty good preconception of what the photo is going to look like. Do the ideas just come to you, it's kind of suddenly out of the blue, as seems to be the case in some of your comments?
Yes, and some of them I work on a lot, come up with an idea. It's I have the camera on a tripod with I now have a cable release that I can, it's a computer, and I can set it to go off every 5 seconds or whatever. So we get in position and the thing fires off every 5 seconds. So I have a lot of editing. It's we move, we talk, we do different things. Some of it is total waste, but it is the only way I know to do it, to be in it and to photograph it. The ideas happen, I can wake up in the middle of the night with an idea. I can struggle with an idea. It's just, it's sort of random. I don't know if that answers your question. But
Yeah, that does. So you started off with basically a sort of nature abstraction shot of bark.
yes.
And then shots of the landscape and your home. And now you're focusing exclusively on sort of the, documenting getting older.
Yes, it's a story I'm telling.
Okay. Do you see any, do you see that all that is the same body of work, or do you think that your interests have changed and from to a more, well, I mean, you and your husband are kind of not the actors exactly, but you're the subjects of your photos.
Yes, and in many ways we're acting too. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like you think of a scene and you go into it and you have to convey that feeling. So you're kind of, acting. And, I've been photographing for 50 years with a break in the middle that divided my two, as I spoke of the two spots. And you grow and you become interested in different things. So yes, I went from abstract macro through landscape, through photographing other people, through diptychs and all that. It was when I turned 70 that it hit me. What do I look like? I see the end. I rounded a corner and I see the end. And I was scared and I was interested and I was intrigued by the whole thing. I've put myself out there because I have done a lot, not a lot, but I've done some naked pictures. I've gotten a lot of, unfortunately, bad feedback about that, and fortunately, some very good feedback about that. But I have kept going because it is a passion of mine to convey this time in my life. I feel somehow that it's what I'm supposed to be doing right now. I'm 81. I'm going to keep going, and who knows where it's going to go. But you know, if you are at all into your medium and into life, you're going to change over the time. I had this new digital camera. I knew nothing about digital. I had to learn it. I learned it, and I learned color printing through all this bark stuff, and then the landscape. So it was, and then when I turned 70, I went, oh, I think I'll do some close-ups of me and just see what I look like. So that's how it evolved. Did that
Thank you.
answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Did you also have a question for Neil DeWitt?
Well, I was going to let someone else take a shot, but I will be
Okay,
happy
sure.
to ask
Yeah.
him a question too. Neo, I saw your photos at Mercury 20, and of course there are lots of photographers who do nocturnal, the landscape, the urban landscape by night. How do you just walk around with a tripod, or do you scout out locations first? And also with your people, your portraits, are you having, I mean, I notice they're all very well lit. So are you kind of controlling the lighting and kind of creating these stage sets of their houses while you're in the audience outside?
Oh, thank you for that question, or a series of questions. I'll try to take them in order. So
Sure.
with the night stuff, I do a little both. I mean, sometimes if I'm out during the day and I see something that might look interesting at night, I'll take a picture with my iPhone just so that I get the geolocation, and then come back at night and see what the situation is. But, you know, to be honest, often I am just driving around or walking around. Usually I'll drive somewhere and then get out with my tripod and walk around. And you know, it's really best to be at street level, you know, on foot or on a bike, and then see what you can see and what's a good scene. And sometimes I will go out and spend a lot of time scouting, you know, being out at night late and not come back with any photographs, not having taken a single photo. And then sometimes, boy, you know, a half dozen just from one spot, really, because there's a lot of interest on some street. For the night portraits, it was really challenging. I didn't do anything. I didn't bring any lighting with me, and I did sometimes ask people to move a lamp inside, you know, to try to throw more light, a side light on them or something like that. But really it was kind of a balancing act of trying to expose for both the highs and the lows, usually for the highs so that things aren't totally blown out, and then bringing up the shadows a little bit in post-production.
Right.
But that's nice of you to say that they're well lit, because it was.
Well, normally if people are looking out their window, they're going to be silhouetted. So,
Right.
and they were all
Yeah.
lighted as if spotlit. So, you know.
Yeah, and it didn't always work. I mean, would take, you know, 3 to 5 pictures of each family, and usually there was 1 or 2 good ones where, because they're slightly long exposures, you know, 0.8 of a second or so, it's easy for people to just move and blur things out. And actually some of those are good photos too.
Oh, I'm just curious, when you're metering them, are you using a spot meter on the people?
Well, in the in-camera
Yeah.
exposure meter, but I'm not using a separate device or anything like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, continued good luck. Don't get robbed like some of the other photographers.
I will say that the news of what's been going on has really changed my behavior a little bit, and so I'm much more careful, not going out as often, which is a disappointment.
Yeah.
Okay, share the story. What happened? What's the story?
Oh, well, I mean, I know of at least one photographer out at Albany Bulb who was robbed of everything. He was out, I think, taking either landscape or bird shots, and yeah, that was it. DeWitt, maybe you know some other news of people who've been.
Well, I mean, people at Twin Peaks have been robbed. Someone was killed there.
Oh.
And actually, if you watch online, there are these camera nabobs that I watch all the time, and they had film of a photographer friend of theirs being followed home from somewhere and robbed in his carport.
Oh my God.
So, you know, got to be careful out there. Cameras are very expensive, and they're
Yeah.
tempting targets.
Yeah.
I think we have time for just one more question before we wrap ourselves up. Does anybody have anything pressing to ask our guests?
I see me.
I don't have a question, but just like maybe a kind of, pondering on what, I saw tonight. And Marna, I just want to thank you for the work you are doing, and how, I really feel that it hit me very strongly, the images of aging gracefully and acknowledging in your body what life has done to you, or what you've gone through. And there is something so beautiful about that I think we need to celebrate, and fight against, trying to look at age 80 like you're 50, because I think it's really important. And I really hope that your images get out there and people see the beauty of, what our body goes through as it ages very beautifully. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you for saying that. The work is getting out more now.
Mm-hmm.
I've had some nice, honored things happened for me this year, and
Mm-hmm.
this is one of them. I'm going to have there'll be more things coming up. So if I don't want to go into it right now, but
Mm-hmm.
It is getting out there, and thank you. It's been hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, it's also crossing boundaries of my own,
Mm-hmm.
and thinking about dying and aging and what I look like, and we all worry about that. It's so unimportant in many ways, but it needs to be honored.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be acknowledged. We all are going to do it. We all are aging. And it's just one of those things. You can't stop it.
I have to add an anecdote here. I just read a biography of Benjamin Franklin, who was, of course, as we all know, flirtatious in France. And he wrote a letter to some younger woman, and he said he was 80 at the time. And he said, well, I can't offer you all the charm and energy that I could as a young man of 50.
Yes.
But
He was known as a dirty old man, right?
yeah.
That was when he was 40.
Well, I'd just like to say it's just been really sweet to see both of your work and the different way that you've looked at pieces of a life. It was really, really wonderful. I'm going to segue us into the part of our evening where we're going to offer up opportunities for artists. And if anybody who is attending tonight has anything they want to share, this would be the time to do it. This could be artist calls, it could be shows that we should see, whatever comes to mind. Anybody have anything?
I'm going to start because I already put it in the chat. This is an artist's retreat, and it is the Ucross Foundation in Wyoming. And there are two fellowships. One is for ordinary people, and the other is for Native Americans. Both my husband, who is a writer, and I had a fellowship. We applied separately but went together, and it was extraordinary. Way out in the middle of
Wyoming.
Wyoming. Yes, have you been there?
I've heard of it.
Yeah,
I'm interested in artist residency, so
I'll tell you anytime. But it's on a working sheep ranch, and Annie Proulx was there writing the
Brokeback Mountain.
Brokeback Mountain, and at Close Range is the group of stories. Okay, anybody else?
I just wanted to say for photographers, that there's a portfolio review coming up, sponsored by Photo Alliance at the San Francisco Art Institute. If you Google up Photo Alliance, you'll find out more information about it. I can't recommend it higher. It is life-changing. It was for me. So.
Thank you. Well, I will share that we have space for new artist members at Gallery Route 1, and applications for membership are reviewed every 3 months. So I'm going to put a link in the chat. If anybody is interested, you can grab the link.
And briefly tell them what they get as members of the gallery, other than prestige.
Well, the artist members run our exhibition program and get to have solo show of their work every 1.5 to 2 years is my estimate, as well as participate in an annual members exhibition, possible to sell small works in our alcove gallery, and support the gallery's programs as well. Anybody else have something to share?
I'll just jump in and say I had a sneak peek at a show that is going to open on Friday at Mercury 20 Gallery, and that is large works by Johanna Pothig, and it looks just wonderful. So I'd encourage people to check out Mercury 20. It's in downtown Oakland on 25th Street. Yeah, I think it'll be a wonderful show.
Thank you, Neo. All right, well, this is probably a good time to wrap things up. Did you have anything else to say, Pamela?
I don't, except I'd like to have a vote, if we can, for next month. We have 2 wonderful photographers lined up. Unless you guys think that it would be better to have someone in another discipline for a month, give photography a rest. Anybody have strong feelings?
Me.
It doesn't seem so.
Okay. Okay, the decision is mine then.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you are interested in presenting as an artist at a future artist exchange event, then send an email to Pamela. It's Pamela Blotner at gmail.com. And maybe Pamela, you can put your email in the chat for us.
I will do it.
If you were moved by today's presentation and want to support the work that Gallery Route 1 does to inspire people to experience the world in new ways through art, then click on the link that I'm going to put in the chat, and you can select community outreach donations and then artist exchange and donate directly to this program. And thanks again, Pamela, for pulling together some wonderful artists. Thank you, Marna Clarke and Neo Serafimidis, for sharing your work with us this evening. And let me get that link in the chat for you.
And Shelley, thank you for being our wizard. And thank you all, group. And please give us input, and please become regulars. We're fascinating.
All right. And there's Pamela's email address if you need that. And our next event is happening on March 16th. So we hope to see you again. Thanks for coming.